Hi there, my friend. I want to thank RG175 for sponsoring this episode of the Independent School Moonshot Podcast. Great schools thrive under great leadership. At RG175, we understand that finding the right match between a school and its next leader is a defining moment for both heads and trustees. With extensive experience in independent school leadership and a highly personalized approach, we guide boards through thoughtful search processes and support school leaders through key career transitions. Whether you're looking for your next leadership opportunity or seeking the ideal fit for your school, RG175 is here to help. Visit rg175.com. Again, that's rg175.com to learn more, because behind every successful school is a great leader. Hi there, my friend. I'm Peter Barron, and welcome to today's episode of the Independent School Moonshot Podcast. I absolutely love it when I have a repeat guest. I think it's so cool that we're able to do this. And today I have Susan Perry, who was on an earlier episode with us, maybe, 6, 7, 8 months ago. Susan is the Associate Head of School for Wellness and Belonging at Forsyth Country Day School in North Carolina. She's also a Senior Consultant at Expo Elevate. And I'm really thrilled to be able to jump into a conversation that I'm super passionate about, which is like leadership development and investing in your own learning. Certainly something that I spent some time on earlier this year with the Aspiring Leaders Summit. Excited to revisit it here today. But before we do that, Susan Perry, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Peter. I'm a big fan of your work and grateful to learn from the other colleagues who have graced their experience and expertise with us on your previous recordings, and glad to be back and hope to be of help.
I love it. It's fantastic. Thank you again.
Sure.
Before we get started, though, if somebody hasn't checked out our earlier episode, and I'll link to it so people can access it easily, can you just introduce yourself and Forsyth Country Day?
My pleasure. It's always a joy to introduce the school for which I have the honor of serving. Susan Perry, Associate Head of School for Wellness and Belonging at Forsyth Country Day School. We are in Louisville, North Carolina. We're a pre-K through 12 school, located a little bit outside of Winston-Salem, a little bit further away from Greensboro, about 45 minutes from Greensboro. And we are welcoming spring here to this part of North Carolina. We're about 75 years old as a school. And I have the good fortune of working with some great colleagues here, wonderful families, and supporting the growth and development of students and kids.
Yeah.
So that's
And I know you're passionate about supporting the growth and development
I
of
am.
faculty and aspiring leaders. Like, where does that come from? Like, why do you believe that career growth is so critical for leadership development?
Thank you for asking. I have had the good fortune to have been mentored by fantastic leaders in my career. And one of my top 3 leadership qualities is to listen. And I meet for really 2 reasons. I meet to listen, and I meet to learn, and I meet to give. Those 3 things drive the answer to your question. Folks have poured into me, and I want to give it back. And I know that when we have effective leadership in place at schools, it's a great day for kids, it's a great day for families, and it's a great day for mission-aligned work in schools. So it's really simple for me. Leadership is a process, and in order to be effective at it, we really do have to learn how to give and receive feedback in order to grow. And growing and developing is a really important part of leadership and fundamental to being effective at it. So I see them very linked to the concept of wellness and serving in the role as a leader.
But it's also really hard to do, to get
So hard.
It is so it's something that, for a long time I struggled with. I'm curious, like, why do you think that is? Why do you think it's so hard for leaders to give like really good feedback to folks that they work with?
It's actually not a secret. And we have the folks at, the Harvard Negotiations Project, Sheila Heen in particular, to thank. Their research on the answer to that question, why is it so hard? And I like to just keep it simple, Peter, and remind us we care deeply about what people think of us. And so when we look at their research, one of the things that we can learn is that really, regardless of the industry, whether it be education or finance or, pick one, feedback is almost 100% of the time rated as the thing that causes the most angst in workplace relationships. And so I have a question, for you when I think about your question to me, and I'm going to ask you to pull out your phone or imagine in your mind, if you're a listener, if you were to look on your opening screen, how many of those apps that you have on your phone might be giving you feedback at any one point in time? How many? 1 to 5?
Oh, 100%. I mean, I can 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I mean, there's tons of them.
Tons, right?
Work related, working out, like feedback from working out, like all the things, right? Right? All the things.
Yeah, and this is where you and I can, really start and hopefully help our listeners, is that if we were to ask them to answer the same question as they're driving or wherever they're listening right now, they probably say the same thing.
Right.
So Peter, we are absolutely swimming in feedback, all the time. And, in the workplace relationships, it really comes in 3 forms. One, it can be, a performance evaluation or performance feedback. Number 2, it could be coaching, which is a conversation designed to help us get better.
Yeah.
And then the third one, which is really the focus of my work, is about affirmation. And we know that it takes about 4 comments and feedback in the affirmative way, not necessarily positive, affirming, to really just experience that we're balanced in receiving the feedback that we get in our workplace. So that 4-to-1 ratio, and thank you to the Center for Creative Leadership for helping us with that, really important aspect when I think about how we can be effective in our leadership in not only providing it, but to give it. Lastly, Peter, feedback can also be, in our personal lives, the very unique look that you receive from a loved one about how important the relationship is to the other person and what you might offer them in your look back to them. So when I say we care deeply about how other people speak or think about us, these are the things that move us when we think about the different ways in which feedback comes to us and how we're swimming in it. And so I ask this question. It may not be our focus is about necessarily giving it. What if we challenged ourselves, as Sheila has asked us to do? What if we got just a little bit better at receiving it? Even when it's off base, ill-timed, not what we expected. Because, Peter, if we wait for the perfect person to come along to give us exactly that feedback that we need, we're going to wait a long time. So I really want to get to the learning quicker, right?
Yeah.
Even in the stuff that might hit us as off base.
So I've got a bunch of questions. I'll start with this one though. When you talk about affirmations, like what would that look like? What could that look like?
It's really a mindset, Peter, first. It is a gift that if we can orient ourselves into thinking that our role, particularly in administration, in our learning communities, is to be genuinely committed to the other person's well-being, right? And number 2, the most important person in the room is actually the other person in the room, right? And so when I think about those 2 things driving an orientation to the work, remind me again the nexus of your question so I can align it to be sure I answer it.
Yeah, sure. No, I was just like thinking about if it takes 4 affirmations for something to really settle in, like what would an example of one of an like how would you construct it? I guess is what I'm trying to ask.
Excellent. Thank you. So if we're swimming in it, and we are having a conversation, the most important thing is to help the other person ground themselves in time and space into what we're going to talk about. Is this a coaching conversation? Is this a performance evaluation? Is this, I'm like, gosh, I think you left me off that email last week, and how'd we get there? It's very important when you ask that question, you're in a co-created conversation. In order for that to go just a little bit better, you want to just start us off with, okay, we're going to ground ourselves in space and time, and what in fact are we doing? What are we going to talk about? The next piece, critically important, is to describe the behavior that you would like to speak, not what you interpreted the behavior to be about, but you've observed something, or you've heard something, or you sense something, and using the actual description of the behavior that you have observed in ways in which the other person can also see. And then lastly, the impact. What that might have had on me, maybe on you, Peter, or maybe on a team that we worked on together. Those 3 steps are a model that we could also thank the Center for Creative Leadership for sharing with us widely, is what we call situation, behavior, impact. 3 short sentences. And so in an affirming way, it sounds something like this. Peter, earlier this afternoon, when you gave me a little extra time by sending me an email to say we could start just a little bit later, really helped me be focused on the meeting I needed to have with the family. I appreciate that, and thank you. Situation, you sent me an email, right? Earlier this afternoon. You allowed me that time to receive it, and the impact of that allowed me to be focused on serving a family. Situation, behavior, impact. One of the most important affirming ways that we can be committed to somebody else's well-being, be centered and present with them, and really pay gratitude to how they're being willing to work with us.
And so what would an example, like you had said, it really takes four kind of rotations, or you do it 4 times for it to stick. Did I hear that right?
It's close. Let me offer this in all of our, you bet. So when you're talking about creating cultures of feedback, it takes about 4 of those experiences, Peter, being on the affirming side, right? Not necessarily just between you and me.
Got it.
But as we walk and talk and live, learn, and serve and love in our workplace relationships, it takes about 4 of those affirming experiences to just balance out the other stuff that may not feel so great.
Yeah.
Not even feel like we're feeling purposeful, but just to feel balanced. And, that research is critical in thinking about your question, what would it look like? What do cultures of healthy feedback look like?
So it sounds like to me that for an organization to do that well, there has to be, I would imagine there's like obviously some teaching, right? People have to learn this construct and be able to practice it in order to adopt it. And does that require, like, how would you go about that process of, introducing this to a school community so that it becomes a healthy part of your feedback loop?
Yeah. So when I think of your question, Peter, we are in the most relationally intense industry. Probably that's out there, right? And therefore, point 2, conversations are critical to our wellness, our leadership, right? And our sense of community and supporting students, faculty, and staff.
Yep.
Thirdly, Peter, what if we just got better at listening? How much would our ability to be a feedback-rich culture improve if we actually stopped talking a little bit and listened a whole lot more? And what we do know about listening is that it is the fundamental foundational cornerstone of all healthy relationships in general, whether that be in workplace, home, you name it. So, that's where I challenge people to really think about their own self-awareness around how much they're doing that. Are they the ones that are talking the most, in a meeting? How much are they actually listening and asking impactful questions in order to understand the co-created space that feedback requires to be effective?
That's such an interesting point. And you mentioned self-reflection. Like, how do you, How do you approach that? Like, if somebody is dominant in a meeting, like how would you approach that situation where you could create the conditions for that person to be self-reflective?
It's a really difficult question to answer if we're working with somebody who isn't committed to the possibility that it's happening, right?
Mm.
And so what I often will remind myself and others is that self-awareness, Peter, has two parts. Certainly our own awareness of ourself and our emotions, our thoughts, our feelings and behaviors.
Yeah.
But the second part, Peter, is really important and critically important feedback, but often forgotten, is what is our impact of our behavior on somebody else? So self-awareness has those two pieces. In of itself, just self-awareness does us no good, right? But if we want to grow and learn, we would really need to learn from somebody, how is my behavior, for example, for me as a leader, impacting somebody else, right? I would need to hear that from them. That's how I'm going to get better at being in communication with them and supporting their growth and development. So when I hear your question, when I'm thinking about a person who's in that situation, it's always helpful, and always is not a word I use often. It's always helpful, how likely are you to be open to hearing what, I've observed about maybe how that landed for somebody. Key question is, I will often say, how often do you think that people are having an opportunity to speak in meeting? Not very. Okay, well, how about in the next time that we meet, you and I have a task and we just kind of keep track of how many folks are verbally communicating, others who have thought that they would rather pass, and how often you yourself might identify yourself as the one who's dominating the conversation or contributing to the conversation. And then you have some data to actually put in the middle. And it's not about you versus me. It's about the thing that we're trying to create, which are conversations that go just a little bit better.
Yeah.
And so that's really the first two steps I think about when I hear your question. Always inviting the person to understand, is this a place that we would want to have it? Do we want to have that conversation? And are they in a place they can receive it? And what could I do to help that go better?
That's such an interesting way of going about it, collecting the data. It's fascinating. Hey, if somebody, let me throw another scenario at you. So, imagine you have someone who's wants to lead. They've identified that they want they want to grow to a leadership position at a school. And it could be an assistant director, or what have you, head of school. But they haven't developed this kind of regular feedback practice yet. What would you advise? What would you advise them to do?
Sure. I would remind them that the data is pretty clear on this too, that as we aspire in leadership, I really would challenge them to do the first step, which is to define what leadership is to them. And if the answer to that isn't anything around, again, what CCL would challenge us to adopt, it's a social process, right, that allows us to achieve greater results that we can do together versus individually. And so if leadership to somebody is, a little bit devoid of that awareness of how relational, particularly in education, our roles are, it's going to be hard to adopt a style that's going to engender conversations that include giving and receiving feedback. Fair?
Yeah, fair.
Yeah. So I like to look at it that as our first starting point. Secondly, is it important to them that they want to achieve the results they wish to achieve? That usually are aligned with their values. So our values are super important to have. However, values in of themselves are attached to behaviors. And so our top 1 to 3 values often don't change as a leader, but our behaviors do.
Interesting.
You bet. So if I'm in a meeting where I haven't allowed a teammate to understand what the purpose of, you bet I'm going to change my behavior. I'm going to back up, because one of my values is so important to me, top 3 behind courage, is to be sure I'm committing to the growth and development of somebody else. And so if by something I've said or done isn't helping that person understand that, or the purpose why we're having a conversation, I need to back up and make sure we're on the same page. So you see my behaviors change, but my value didn't.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
I just love that construct of values versus behavior. It makes a lot of sense to me.
You bet. And given the things that are coming at us, Peter, and leaders in independent schools, really, really important to be clear on, what your values are. And there's no judgment from me on what a person chooses. But I'm very transparent about mine. And that doesn't mean it's somebody else's favorite slice of bread. The important piece is that people understand how I try and are committed to behaving in my role in order to support their growth. And so that's why I try to make that distinction, Peter, so that we don't conflate them. It kind of gets us into a corner sometimes when we do.
Yeah.
So when somebody is starting out in leadership and kind of want to adopt that habit, the good news is that when we go down that road, generally speaking, people who are good at receiving it, not necessarily giving it in leadership role, receiving it, very important, have higher job satisfaction, tend to adapt to organizational change and challenge quicker. And then lastly, they tend to have higher 360 performance reviews from their team. They tend to demonstrate behaviors that help teammates feel and experience their values being honored.
Yeah.
Essentially being seen, valued, and heard. Right? Really important for growing and developing people if you're working with somebody who truly is able to recognize what's important to them to accomplish that. And if I'm not the right person or a teammate is the right person, I'm sure going to be committed to connecting with someone that can.
Yeah.
Do you see?
Yeah, I do. And I'm curious, as this feedback practice starts to take hold in a school's culture, like what does a healthy feedback culture look like in a school? Curious.
Yes. So this is where sometimes a system or a platform can help you because you have to actually correlate it, in my opinion, and have a place in which feedback is gathered. But a healthy feedback culture really does require those first 2 skills that I talked about, right? You have to be able to demonstrate the ability to truly listen to what CCL would call it, your facts, your feelings, and values in a conversation all the time, not just once in a while, but like all the time. And, number 2, as a result of that, asking clarifying questions to help us understand, what it is that we're talking about. Lastly, I like to keep it simple when you ask that question. It's really important to define what feedback is. And I look at it this way, Peter, feedback is really any information available to you about you. So, again, we can thank Sheila Heen for that and her team. However, it just brings down the temperature about, oh my goodness, I'm going into this conversation and our guard is up already. It's reasonable to be, having emotions about it. But if we accept the premise we're swimming in it all the time,
Yeah.
and number 2, that our commitment is actually getting to the place where we're willing to receive it, not necessarily take it, but receive it in a way that we could learn something from it.
Yep.
Okay? We have just a much better chance of the conversations, plural, that we have in a workplace just going a little bit better. And so I try not to just isolate feedback as this one thing that happens over here.
Yep.
We're actually experiencing it all the time. You and I are experiencing it right now.
Yeah.
But if, again, if we're able to recognize the mindset that we bring to it, is reflective of the fact that it's around us all the time. We're committed to somebody else's growth and development. There are different kinds of actual specific feedback that we want to focus on. Then we can really work on getting better at receiving it ourselves so that we are able to deliver in leadership for others.
Got it. I love that idea of like we're getting feedback all the time.
All the time.
All the time.
Yep.
Yeah.
And, I could go down the road of sharing with you the neurological implications of that and how our nervous systems are right. Yeah. How our nervous systems are reacting to it. But, Peter, I'd offer this for our listeners too, when we're thinking about how we respond versus how we react to feedback. And our response is much more in control than for ourselves than it is to react to it. And I'd like to point out 3 ways in which sometimes we might catch ourselves in a hot spot around feedback. And Peter, the first place that we often will read about in the research, particularly with Sheila Heen and her team, NCCO, is that we get really, really aware if the feedback we receive is the truth. And we automatically become defensive and like, oh my goodness, I didn't do that. That wasn't me. And I often will walk people through, and myself included, what is it about that I'm not willing to see? So the first real hotspot is when we receive something that could be actually quite true. And you're shaking your head. It can be unsettling, but that's where we can, on the other side of the coin, that's where we can, grow and develop and learn. The second one, Peter, after truth, is that the person who's giving it is really important to us. So if that's our supervisor, the actual person who's delivering it to us, that impacts us differently than if I'm receiving it from my watch. And by the way, it's, time to go to the next meeting. That's different kind of feedback. Fair?
Yeah, or you didn't exercise today.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then the one that, and for the record, that one tends to be much more activating than the truth is sometimes. But the third one, Peter, is when it's related to our identity, that can take a long time to recover from. And people have varying degrees of how long they take to come back to center and not be in a highly reactive state versus a responsive state when we feel that some part of our identity has been challenged. So those 3 areas tend to elicit the hotspots, as I call them. But the rest is open to consideration. And I do need my watch to tell me once in a while, like, go ahead and get outside and get some exercise.
Right. Yeah. Make sure you get your steps.
Sure.
Yeah. I'm thinking back many, many years ago, I had a 360 and there was some stuff in there. It was like, oh yeah. And I can tell you all these years later, I still think about it and I still try to work to be better based on that feedback. It was critical to my development. Absolutely critical.
You're so courageous to say that, Peter. I don't know how often we share that with each other as leaders. Like, man, I heard some stuff was hard to hear, but I did grow from it. Those are stories that are very helpful to us in leadership and in schools to stay centered and get better. Sometimes, Peter, there are 3 questions that can help us when we might find ourselves in that situation. And I hope they will be helpful. First, one part of this actually might be true that I'm hearing, right? Number 2, what is a neutral story about what I'm hearing? That the way somebody has spoken to another teammate and there are conclusions that people come to about it. But we actually don't know. So what would be a neutral story about it? And then thirdly, the hard part is, what might be the positive of this that I'm hearing?
Yeah, 100%.
that I need to take home and have somebody really help me with getting better at, or whoever's in that situation.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, there's the example, Peter, of what we call the gap map, out of negotiations project is you and I have an understanding, and the folks who are listening out there, of how we think. What we say or do is how we are received in leadership. But the truth of the matter is a whole nother story about that from the other person, about how we truly are being seen by somebody else. And unless I or anybody else in a leadership role learn that, we're just going to be less effective.
Yeah.
And if you're truly committed to somebody else's growth and development, you have to hear that too. The hard stuff that you had, had no idea that happened.
Yeah.
And own it.
Last question as we begin to wrap up. How can schools do better support emerging leaders in growing beyond their current roles, so that they're not just like doing their job, but that they're truly developing?
What a gift it is that we have people in schools who are committed to doing that, is what I would say, first of all.
Yeah.
And, kudos to them. The more that they can identify, a particular area in their leadership identity that they would like to go, the better that we can serve that question. Fair?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. You don't want to have misdirected energy that the person actually wanted this and we're offering that.
Mm-hmm.
And then always important. And then, number two, when someone is just, starting to learn about it, is that it is a process, and it's a commitment of a mindset about leadership. And I just kind of get right there, if that isn't something that somebody's really open to hearing and they're very interested in kind of my way, the highway, that's fine. That's their journey. My work with them would be to challenge them around super effective to have that orientation of leadership, but where are the instances where you are actually learning from another perspective about how we can get better? I'd just be curious about that. I'd hate to think that we have all the answers and that we're always the expert. My big goal as a leader is to get to the learning quicker. And so, right? And no matter what the situation is, that really requires me to be patient, be present, learn from the people who are having the gift to come to me up to understand that. So for someone who's just starting out in leadership, that mindset is an important thing to discover. Where do they stand, and understand that leadership happens in ways that are very highly social. So that's how I would look at that question.
Fantastic. Susan Perry, Associate Head of School for Wellness and Belonging at Forsyth Country Day and Senior Consultant at Expo Elevate. Thank you again for sharing. I really appreciate it. I do have one more question for you, though.
Right.
If somebody wants to reach out and connect, what's the best way for them to do that?
Sure thing. Happy to have them go to our website at www.fcds.org, Forsyth Country Day School. And my picture is there, and I wish it was a better one, but there it is. And my email is susanperry@fcds.org. Our mascot is the Furies, so go Furies. And all the best to the listeners out there who are interested in getting better and serving others. It's important work.
Susan, thank you again. I really appreciate it. And you'll have to come back yet a third time. That would be fantastic.
My pleasure. And thank you, Peter, for helping so many of us out here in our journeys. Keep at it.
Thank you. Hi there, my friend. I want to thank RG175 for sponsoring this episode of the Independent School Moonshot Podcast. Great schools thrive under great leadership. At RG175, we understand that finding the right match between a school and its next leader is a defining moment for both heads and trustees. With extensive experience in independent school leadership and a highly personalized approach, we guide boards through thoughtful search processes and support school leaders through key career transitions. Whether you're looking for your next leadership opportunity or seeking the ideal fit for your school, RG175 is here to help. Visit rg175.com. Again, that's rg175.com to learn more, because behind every successful school is a great leader.